So you're very welcome. I know that at least one of you in the group has been to some of the sessions that have been running throughout the week for our Future You week. And it's just to remind you again, maybe you're only joining us for the first time today, you're very welcome. We do have different sessions that are running across the week. And Hannah, would you maybe mind popping into the chat box just the link to the website so that people can go and check out the other sessions that are running across the week, and you're very welcome to join in to any of those that are running. This particular session is all about your interview skills. So it's called Supercharge Your Interview Skills. And my name's Gail Hamilton. I'm one of the employability advisors and I am based on the Coleraine campus. So you are, as I say, you're very welcome along today. Throughout the session, I'm going to hand over just in a couple of minutes. I am delighted to be joined by one of our alumna, our former graduates, Catherine Dynes, and she's going to be sharing her experiences. So we'll be delivering this session together, and Catherine will be coming in. She graduated, you maybe heard this in the previous chat, but she graduated last year with a master's and had completed her undergraduate degree just prior to that, and has some experience of working through attending different interviews and learning from that process. So she's going to share her experiences with you throughout the session this morning. And I first met Catherine, I think it was in a very similar program, actually, come to think of it.
Yeah.
It was for the Unlock You, so whenever you were graduating with your undergraduate degree, is that right?
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a very similar program to this one that we first met, and I know that she was going through that process that many of you are probably in at the minute of trying to source opportunities and go through the applications and the interviews. So it's really great to have her along today. So I'm going to just hand over to Catherine just to tell you just for a couple of minutes about who she is and what she studied. So don't want to take up too much of her time. So Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Gail. So as Gail said, I'm Catherine Dynes. It's strange to say that I'm now an alumna. So my undergraduate was in Bachelor of Science and Technology with Design, with a diploma in professional practice. And from there, I stayed on to do a master's in Advanced Composites and Polymers. I did my placement year in an engineering company in Bangor, and I have done, I don't know how many interviews since. Each one has been different. Some have been similar in some ways, but some have been different in other ways. And yeah, so now as a process engineer, I'm sort of seeing now what our company is looking for in interviews and what they're looking for in the application process. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a bit of insight into what we would look for in our applicants, and sort of maybe a couple of tips that would help you use for applications.
That's brilliant, thank you. And these are the learning outcomes for today. So what we're going to be looking at is understanding what an employer is looking for. Now, I'm not sure actually, it would be helpful if you just popped into the chat what your degree is, so what course you're coming from, because I know that we'll have a real mixed bag, and this will apply, interview preparation will apply across the board, no matter what industry you're coming from. So it'd be good just to get an idea of all of the different areas that people are joining us from today. And while you're doing that, I'll just go ahead and talk through what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to look about understanding what an employer is looking for at interview, thinking about how you prepare effectively for an interview. So I'm going to really split it up into the before, the during, and the after the interview. So looking at those three sections and what steps you should be taking at each of those stages to help you, give you the best chance of succeeding at the interview stage. We will look at how to answer the different types of questions you might be asked and how to answer those questions by using the STAR technique, which I'm sure some of you have come across before, but we'll just look at that again because it is a really useful tool in terms of helping you and supporting you with your preparation for interview, and then looking at where you can get further support for interview preparation as well. So beginning with the different types of interview that you might face. So we have, it could be a different types of format of interview. So you have face-to-face interviews, which would have been the traditional format that we all would have previously thought of, but that has very much changed, particularly in the past couple of years. Computer science. So thanks for that. It's good to see where everybody is joining us from. We have telephone interviews, which can be, sometimes you come across a telephone interview maybe in some of the earlier stages of the interview process. So for anybody that has been through any interviews, sometimes you might come across a few of these different types of interview at different stages of the interview process. Other times you may just be invited to an interview and it's a face-to-face interview, and that's the one and the only stage of the interview process. In other scenarios, they have different steps that you have to go through. Video interviews as well. So it could be a video interview where it is the equivalent of a face-to-face interview, but it's held on maybe Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever platform that employer is using, and you will have a live real person at the other side asking you questions. It could also be where you go in, if you're invited to a video interview, you could go in and find that it's a pre-recorded, so that questions would come up on the screen and you have a certain amount of time to answer those questions. So it's being prepared about reading the invitation to interview and saying, right, well, what type of interview am I going to be facing here? Because that helps to build your confidence and takes away that element of surprise whenever you get there. And maybe you're expecting somebody on the other side of the screen and you realize, oh, it's just me. So it's just reading the information that they send through really clearly whenever that comes through to you. And then assessment centre. And as I mentioned, we have an employer joining us just at 11 o'clock today who's going to be looking at the online assessments and how you can best prepare for those as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time or really any time during this session looking at that. What I am going to cover today is looking at the difference between competency-based and also strengths-based interviews, and what are the differences between those. How do you prepare for either or of those styles of interviews coming up? And Katherine, just at this stage, from the interviews that you have been through, what types of interviews or what styles, formats, like did you experience a few different types of interview, or were they all quite similar?
I've sort of had a mixture of ones. So a lot of, I know I can speak for maybe the engineering industry. We would have a mixture of two interviews. So the first one would maybe be a video interview. So more the general questions of, tell us about yourself, sort of a bit of your background based on your CV, and then they'll bring you in for a face-to-face interview. And that could be either for a presentation or for a walk around the site or whatever they want to do with you in the second interview. I have done an assessment centre. I'm not going to go into details, but that was online between the first and the second interview, so they could create a baseline for me on what they needed to question me on in the second interview. The styles have had both, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, I've had a mixture of ones. Some are different in that you feel like you're talking to the screen and you don't get that sort of contact with persons that are doing the interview, but it eases your nerves in a way because they can't see your hand shaking. But on the face-to-face, you do feel that that is your chance to sell yourself, and that is your chance to show, look, I have these skills and this is what I could bring to your company.
Brilliant, thank you. And I should say, see if anybody has any questions throughout this, please feel free to pop them into the chat box. Hannah's there and is going to be keeping an eye on the chat box and will prompt me if I'm missing anything that's coming through, but absolutely welcome questions throughout, so do feel free to pop those in at any stage. So as I mentioned, we're going to look particularly at strengths based interviews versus competency-based interviews. And I know this is something that Catherine did come up against, and that's something that other students have come up against, because we tend to, traditionally a lot of interviews have been competency-based and we focus a lot of our preparation around that style of questioning. And then you find yourself going into an interview and they start questioning you in a strengths-based style, and you go, what is going on here? I have not prepared for these questions, and it throws you off a bit. So it's just really highlighting the difference to you so that you can be prepared, and we'll talk about how to prepare for those questions in the next couple of slides as well. So with a strengths-based interview, it has its foundations, and I know we have a psychology student in here, but it's based in sort of positive psychology, and the theory behind it is that if the employer identifies your strengths, then they'll be able to figure out if you're going to be a good fit for the role. So it's all about figuring out what way do you work, what things do you most enjoy, what are your strengths, and then if they identify that, and they can find the best fit for you, and they can compare and see, would you be a good fit for this company? And if they find somebody that's a good fit, then the thought process behind it is you're going to be happier in that job, and you're going to perform better, you're going to stay longer with the company. So that's why employers tend to use that style of questioning. Questions that you might come up against in that would be things like, what are you good at? How do you stay motivated? What do you like to do in your spare time? So those kinds of questions would be strengths-based interview. And I said we will cover how you prepare, because actually when you look at it, the preparing for both of them is still quite similar, but it's just being ready and not being thrown off if an employer starts to ask you those types of questions. Uh, it is thought that it's more difficult to prepare for a strengths-based interview, and that's again why employers tend to use it, because they want to really get to know you as a person, and they feel that it's more difficult to prepare for. But there are still things that you can do and that you should do in preparation for that type of interview. And you may not know, Catherine, I'm guessing that you didn't know before you attended the interview. It's not like they will outline to you this will be a strengths-based interview. And sometimes you will be told this will be a competency-based interview. But you're not always guaranteed to know what type of interview that you're going to be facing. But as I say, we'll cover about how you prepare for those. The other thing about strengths-based interview, if you think of from the employer's point of view, and just think about this in your own life, if you're talking to somebody and you go onto a subject, a topic that they enjoy, that they're passionate about, what do you notice about that person when they start talking about that? They could talk about it for hours. You know, you don't have to, it's not like you're trying to get that information out of them. They're only too happy to sit there and to talk about it. And their body language changes, the tone of their voice changes, you can hear the enthusiasm coming across. So that's what the employer will be looking out for whenever you're in that type of interview. So it's that enthusiasm, it's being able to talk about projects that you've been working on in the previously, and things that you enjoyed about that, and that will then come across clearly to that interviewer. Competency-based interviews are what we would, we tend to think of these as the more traditional style of interview. So it's designed to test one or more skills or competencies. So it's more systematic. So you'll be asked a question based on assessing a particular skill or competency that's needed for that job. And can anybody give me an example of what one of the competencies might be that an employer might be assessing you for during an interview? Just pop it into the chat box if you can think of anything that you might be assessed on. Yep, communication, teamwork, MS, is that, I'm thinking, is that like IT sort of skills, competencies? So you're hitting the nail on the head there, whatever you say about communication skills, teamwork, problem solving, yep, all of those kind of areas. And those questions would be designed like, describe a time when, or give me an example of when you led a team. Tell me about a time when you dealt with conflict within the workplace. So you're talking to them specifically about something that you have done previously, and it's based on the fact that if you have done this in a previous scenario, then that demonstrates your ability to do this in the future again. So you're pulling on previous experiences to demonstrate your ability to carry out that skill in their workplace, maybe in a different setting, whatever, but it's based on sort of previous performance. So hopefully that gives you an idea about the difference between strengths-based and competency-based questions. And now we will just move on to looking at how you prepare for those questions whenever they're coming up. So as I say, I'm splitting this up into before the interview, during, and after the interview. And it's important to say, if you get an invitation to interview, you should take confidence from that. You've already done really well to be shortlisted and to be given the opportunity. The employer would not spend their time interviewing a candidate that they don't feel would be suitable for the role. So if you've got an invitation to interview, that should be a confidence boost already. So there's no reason why you cannot get that interview. Okay, you're already considered a suitable candidate. And the important thing then is doing your preparation and being ready for that interview. So I would really encourage you to think about that, because part of, and you'll see it coming up again, it's about, as well as preparing the questions and doing all of this, it's about developing a positive mindset going into interview as well. So not going in thinking, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to get this. So it's thinking positively and knowing that you already considered a suitable candidate. So Katherine, maybe I could just ask you at this stage, whenever you were coming up to interviews, was there anything, so what preparation did you do? Any tips for anybody who is going to be, so I'm not sure people on this call, maybe some people have an interview that's actually coming up very soon, or they know that it's going to be something that they're facing down the line. We've probably got some with negative experiences of interviews on the call, we usually do, but it's how, any tips or anything, experiences to share about what you did before an interview to help you prepare.
Yeah, so the first thing I did for my interview, for all interviews, never mind for just here, is I printed out the job description and what would be entailed in the job and my CV. And I mean, bullet point by bullet point through what they were looking for, essential criteria, desirable criteria, what you would be doing, and really think about what they're asking you to do. So say they're asking you to be confident in product management or confident in leading a team, give examples of where you've done that and write them down. I know maybe some people will say, oh, I'll just know, but when it comes to the day, you won't remember. So write it down. And I can honestly say writing down things makes it so much easier. And should it be 5 or 6 pages of preparation, that is not time wasted. It is not time wasted at all. So literally take your time and run through the job description as it's given. Go through your essential criteria and look at your CV and say, well, I have got that experience there. So this is where I've done it in university, or I've done it in, placement year, or whatever it is. And then go into sort of the company itself. So research the company heavily. I would say most of the people that I know who have done interviews, including myself, there will be at least one question on what do you know about the company. And it's more, what do you know, and are you invested? Are you encouraged by the company? Are you interested? Would you feel that this would be a job that you want to work at for X number of years? So look at the company and see what they offer. For Decora Blinds, we offer different blinds, but looking into that, so where are they reaching out to? So say it's in biomedical, what products are they making? What are they doing? If it's in business, what sector of the business are they in? How far is their global outreach? What's their employability like? How successful are they? What is their news like? What have they been doing on LinkedIn? So really look at that, because there is some wee gems on LinkedIn or on their own website that you will miss if you don't look into it. In your CV, if there are gaps that you're missing in the essential criteria, don't panic about that. Okay, some people say, I haven't got that as an essential criteria. That's okay if you don't have that. all I would say is, if you haven't got it, what would you do to get that experience? So say it was maybe in a piece of software and you had minimal knowledge from university, but you hadn't got to the experience that they wanted. Say, maybe I haven't got the experience that you're looking for, but I would be willing to learn, and this is how I would do it, whether it be through doing courses, doing extra time over work. Really think about what you would do and how you would work to become a successful employee. For those of you who would be going into maybe artsy jobs or programming jobs or whatever it might be in IT, I know portfolio really helps. And the portfolio is something, it's a paper copy that you can give to somebody to say, this is what I have done. So whether that be a printout of your final year project, out of maybe things that you have done in placement with the approval of your placement company, all those things help. And it's a piece of material that you can show to your future employer to say, look, this is what I've done and this is my skills. And don't leave that to the last minute to print out. Think about what you would put together in your portfolio. I know my portfolio, it was my full final year design project and then my master's research article. And from there I was saying, look, this is what I did and this is how I went about doing it. And this is what I could bring to your team with the skills I learned during those couple of months of doing the project. 4 tips before you do an interview: read over your CV. And I mean, really read over your CV. There's been times I've been questioned, on your CV you've said, and you automatically face, you're thinking, oh no, what did I say on my CV? And it does put the fear in you thinking, what did I say? But read over your CV to make sure that you know what you've said, refresh your memory of what you've said to make sure that you know what you're saying matches what is on the CV, because if you don't say it right, you can get caught out, and the last thing you want to do is be caught out first thing in the interview. Don't leave your prep to the last minute. So do not leave your interview prep to the night before. Take a second night. So whether it be, I'm going to research the company tonight, tomorrow night I'm going to go over the essential criteria, and I'm going to go for my skills. Or if you have a presentation to do or something to prepare for, spend the time going through that and do little by little rather than a big chunk the night before. If you're doing an interview in the morning, make sure you get a good sleep. The last thing an employer wants to see is you coming in with your eyes swollen out of your head and you're tired and you're yawning, because it will not give them a good impression if you're coming over and you're yawning through an interview. If it's in a later afternoon, make sure you get something to eat and make sure you take that time out to relax yourself after maybe coming from your job or coming from a busy day. Make sure you take that time to just sort of chill out and then zone out before you go into the interview. And you will absolutely find it so much easier once you're cool and you're calm and collected.
That's brilliant, thank you. I think you have covered pretty much everything. So yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of these things already, the importance of research, and that is a really big one. So Catherine talked about that, looking into researching your company. So who is it? What do they do? Where are the target markets? Have they launched new products? Know about their history, about things that are really important to them. What are their values? You don't need to know absolutely everything about them. I remember whenever I was joining Ulster University and trying to research the company there, and you could get caught down so many rabbit holes because it's such a large organization and there's so many publications. So, keep yourself focused and think about, right, I need to know what this company stands for, what are their values, what's their main focus, what are their priorities at the minute. As I say, it'll be slightly different depending on the industry, but you want to be able to tell them about who they are and where they're located, how many branches do they have, and things like their website. And Catherine mentioned some of these. I mean, their social media sites, or social media is actually a really good way to keep up, because they will be highlighting things that are really important and things that they want to shout about and they want to sell at that moment in time. So keeping an eye on their LinkedIn, on Twitter, on whatever other social media outlets that they are using. So you want to know about the company that you're going for. As Catherine rightly said, very frequently, I mean, you will go into an interview, and if the first question isn't tell us a bit about yourself, it will be, so can you tell us what you know about what we do and who we are? So those are, and you want to have that really well prepared so you can start off on a strong note in the interview, because it helps to build your confidence through it for the rest of the interview as well. And then researching the job that you're going to be doing. So again, Catherine talked about this really clearly about how she got the job description and she went through it point by point. And this is a really important part, and we'll come back to this in the next, whenever we're talking about preparing for questions, because you will want to, you need to know, highlight, I get a highlighter, underline things, circle it. What is it? What are the skills? What are the qualities that they have mentioned in that job description? Because that's your key. They're telling you, the employer is saying, this is what we want to see in this candidate. This is the evidence that we need. And you cannot assume, and some students, and not just students, people make the mistake of going in and thinking, well, it's in my CV. They already know I've done that. They know I studied that course. So like, I don't need to tell them about it. Tell them about it. So be ready to talk about your experience. Don't assume that they know. And as I say, we will look at the STAR technique, and it's a really good technique for helping you to kind of structure those responses and make sure that you're giving them enough information in a concise way. So being really familiar, going through that job description and circling the skills, the qualities that they are looking for in that candidate. And then you will start to, and we'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, just about pulling out your examples for those. The practical preparation then, that's just things like, where is the interview? Is it online? If it's online, do you have a quiet space that you can go to? Do you know that the internet connection is good? Like Catherine there this morning had to face firewalls and trying to get access. So having a trial run, going in and checking that you can get access to whatever platform it is that they're using, checking that you're not going to come across any of those things last minute, because what you want to do is remove any last minute stresses on the day of the interview before the day of the interview that you can, because it helps to keep you calm and helps you then just to focus and be present in the interview and to perform your best in answering the questions. So things like planning your travel and knowing where does, if it's public transport, what are the timings, where do I get off, how far do I have to walk. Now inevitably sometimes things happen and it's out of your control. Something else I would always say is get the number of the company, the person, there's usually that information on your invitation to interview letter. Have that on hand, put it in your phone beforehand, so that if something does happen that's out of your control, you have a number there, you can phone them and you can let them know. Unfortunately, there is no guarantee that if you're late that they're going to give you another interview time. It depends on their schedule and if they can do that. But if you have been polite, you've phoned ahead, you've explained what has happened, it's something out of your control, then they may offer you an alternative time and you might be able to do that interview later, but have that number with you. And then thinking about what you're going to wear. So put it here, dress for success. So part of that comes into your research about the company too, and finding out, what is the dress code for that company. For the most part, you're going to wear formal interview. That doesn't mean if you're, it doesn't have to be a full three-piece suit or anything like that, but something that looks smart. And part of that helps you as well. If you feel confident and you are dressed appropriately for interview, it helps to build your confidence. If you feel, so I would encourage you to pick something as well that you feel comfortable in, and that does help you to feel confident and feel successful whenever you are going for interview. But have that planned again in advance, so you're not stressing about that on the morning of the interview. And something I forgot to mention just right at the start of this section was about, whenever you get that letter for interview, do read it and read it really carefully. So whether that's a letter or the email, just check, things like, do you have to prepare? I mean, Catherine mentioned it there about doing a presentation. What are they telling you about the interview? So if you have to prepare a presentation, then that's another thing that you need to factor in to your preparation. And so it's not missing things like that. Also, things that people commonly miss are the little line at the bottom that says, please confirm if you're going to attend the interview. So you need to confirm with them that you are going to be attending. So read that really carefully, and make sure that you're not missing any bits of important information within that. So then preparing for questions, and I have another slide after this that we will look at the STAR technique. But we talked earlier about the difference between the strengths-based and the competency-based interview. Just have a question coming here regarding the technical issue and internet connection. Is it okay to ask them to pre-test? Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely fine if there's a way that you can ask them. You're not guaranteed that they're going to facilitate that, but you can ask them, yeah, if it's okay. Now, sometimes you can just go in and just check. You might even say it's Teams, Microsoft Teams is a common one for employers to use. You might go in and test the Teams platform with someone else that you know, get them to set up a meeting with you so you can go in and you can check that it works on your computer. But yeah, you can ask them if it's possible to have a practice run. Is it okay that you do that? And then it's up to them, but that's absolutely fine to ask that, because it is nice to know that those things are going to work. Yes, you want to ask something else?
Yeah,
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, sorry, about the technical issues and the internet connection. That has happened to me before. So anything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong to me. What I have done is I have emailed the company and said, look, I have poor internet connection at this point in time, or whatever it is. Give them your mobile number so that if for some far-stretched imagination that your internet does cut out, that they will be able to phone you back and pick up where you left off, instead of the panic of, oh no, my internet's not working and I'm taking 5 minutes out of their time. It's okay, and if you pre-warn them in, they will be more than accommodating. So always say, look, if you do have this issue, please phone me on this number and I will be completely available. So they will be okay with that most of the time.
That's brilliant. And Mohammed, you had a question?
Yeah, just 1 minute. I'm going to share my last experience. I had the last interview I had, there was one issue in my side. It was that I joined the meeting by Zoom. When I joined the meeting, the interview, at the first starting of the meeting, I can't hear the voice of the panel, and these take more time after 10 minutes, something like that, and makes me so nervous because I was thinking I lost the interview, I can't hear anything, and the panel don't do anything, just talking together, and the panel, I couldn't hear anything. After a while, just waiting, and told me, okay, you can rejoin again. After 15 minutes, something like that, when I rejoined, everything was working. I am wondering what happened that time. I can't, I'm sure it was not any issue in my side, technical, because everything was working very well. Maybe they make me silence the speaker for my side, silence, something like that. But the issue was that these phenomena make me nervous, and after that I didn't have a good interview because of happening that issue.
And it is really, I mean, we have all been there whenever technology doesn't play ball, and it does throw you off and it does make you more nervous. There's no doubt about it. Um, it's unfortunate that you had that experience and that it did affect the rest of your interview. That is a good thing, that a good suggestion that Catherine made, that if you have a phone number that you can give them and that they can carry out the interview by phone if they agree to that. Another thing is, I mean, you've already lived through that now, and the fact that once you left and you rejoined, because that's something that we would ask students to do, and magically sometimes it works. We don't know why, I don't understand why, but if you just even let them know, for the most time there's usually a chat function that you can use, and if you just say, sorry, my connection isn't working, I can't hear the panel, I'm going to try leaving and rejoining, and just letting them know so they know, okay, he's going to disappear and he's going to come back again. And hopefully that rectifies now that you've had that experience. Hopefully you don't have to have that. Hopefully it works for you the next time. But yeah, I mean, it is just, this is one of the things with technology, and you try to eliminate as much of these things as possible beforehand, but there's no getting away from it that at times on the day these things happen. And it's just about managing your nerves within that and knowing that, okay, this is out of my control. And there is an element of relying and hoping that the employer is quite gracious within that. And quite often, most of the time they are, because as I say, we have all been there, and the chances are they have been there at some stage in the past, particularly in the past couple of years, where technology hasn't worked the way that they hoped it would. So I would expect and hope that we would all have a bit of grace for that. But it is, unfortunately, is one of those things, and you try to prepare and do your preparation beforehand, but there is an element of you just hope that on the day that it works. But there's a couple of little things that you can try going forward if it happens to you again.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so we have thinking about the interview questions, and again, referring back to the importance of going through that job description. And whether it's strengths-based, if it's strengths-based, you want to be looking for, right, well, what am I good at? What are my strengths? How can I demonstrate those strengths to an employer? And regardless of whether it's strengths-based or competency-based, you're going to want to and going to need to have your examples ready. So if you're talking about something that you're good at, if you're talking about a way that you like to work, you will be bringing in examples from previous experience. So whether that is from your university studies, a project that you worked on, whether it's from part-time work and how you worked well within a particular team. So regardless, you will be looking and trying to identify, right, well, what strengths would be needed within this role? What kind of person would they be looking for? If it's competency, what are those skills? And how do I demonstrate that? So what are my examples? And I'm going to just flick to the next slide, and then I'll come back just to finish this one after. But this is the STAR technique, and this is a useful tool to remember whenever you're preparing your answers to questions. And what I will do for those who have attended this session today, afterwards, later on today, I will send you a copy of the recording of the slides and some additional resources to support you in terms of preparing for interview. But this one, as I say, it's really helpful. On the one hand, you have people who, and you'll know which side you fall into. Sometimes you go into an interview and some people just can't wait to get finished hearing their own voice, and they can't wait to finish the question. And when they're nervous, they just kind of freeze and they can't think and they don't say enough at interview. On the other hand, you have people who find that whenever they're nervous, they just go off and they just can't stop talking, and they have that person in their voice saying, right, okay, you've talked enough now, just stop talking, but they just keep talking. So this technique, using STAR technique in your preparation, helps you to coordinate your answers or structure your answers, and it allows you to have the confidence in knowing that you're hitting the key things that that employer is looking for, and you're doing it in a concise way, a way that's easy to follow. So it gives your answers some structure, and it helps you whether you're somebody that starts to ramble and just goes off and starts talking about things that aren't relevant to the question, or whether you're on the other end and you just freeze and you don't talk enough in your answers. It gives you that structure to follow, and again builds that confidence for that. So the first thing here is listening carefully to the question. Really do, now I know that we're kind of branching into during the interview here, but listen to what it is that they're asking for. Look at what that question is asking for and make sure that you're answering the question. Don't just hear the first couple of words and think you know what they're talking about and then start to form the answer in your head. Listen to the full question. Then you're going to outline, so the S stands for situation. So you're describing a specific event. So these are bringing in your examples, describing a situation or event that you were in. What was it? Basically, you're setting the context so that if I'm on the interview panel, I can kind of set the scene and know where you are. Was this something at university? Was it in part-time work? Was it in a volunteering activity that you were involved in? What was the task? What was the project? What were you trying to achieve? So again, these kind of S and T go together to set the context so that the employer is with you and that they know what you're about to talk about. Then the important, and this should form the main part of your answer, is the action that you took. So what specific actions did you take? And when you're talking about this, you want to say I did and not we, because they want to hear about your involvement and what specific actions that you took. And then the result is what happened in the end. So what was the outcome? Did you, if there's a, if you can attach a number to it to make it measurable, then that's great. Or there could be a reflection in there that actually what you would do again if you were to repeat this. So showing that you're able to reflect and get the learning out of it. So it might be things that you might do slightly differently the next time. But if you can, quantify your result if possible. So they want to see what the outcome was. So this is quite small on my screen, so hopefully you can read this okay, but this just gives you an example of how this plays out. And I know that we're running tight for time here, so I'll let you read through this. As I say, I'll be forwarding these slides, but it shows you how, in response to a question, how you might, using the STAR technique, form the answer to present to an employer. So this is what you can do as part of your preparation, looking at the key skills that they're asking for the job, the strengths, and then thinking about, right, what are my examples that would really support this? And having those fresh in your mind going into the interview. Then during the interview, there's really just, I've only included this slide because this is so important. And I knew that we would be tight for time in this. But during the interview, the importance of body language. So first impressions really count. Whenever you're going into that interview, and being mindful of everyone. So I'm thinking more about an in-person interview where you're attending in person. No matter who you are engaging with, no matter who you're talking to, being mindful of how you talk to that person, your body language, because you have no idea whose opinion all will count and who will be asked. So the likes of whoever is sitting on that reception desk, they may be asked about how you presented for interview. What was that engagement like with that person on the front desk? I have dealt with, so in a previous job role where I would have worked with employers, I had employers who would have come along and delivered in sessions, and they actually said that they would have watched the candidates coming in to the building and seen, again, they're making kind of those, they're trying to figure out who you are, what your motivation's like, are you going to be a good fit? And that is starting from the moment that you're entering that building. So it's something to be mindful of when you go into the room. I mean, this image here, very clearly you can see how the impact of body language before anybody says anything, before you've even had a chance to tell them your name or anything about yourself, your body language has already communicated something to that employer. So it's really important in terms of the interview process and performing well and giving a good first impression. Now, Katherine, I don't know, I'm trying to remember what questions we had just for you, maybe just to finish up, because I know that we are running out of time. If everyone's okay, we'll maybe take another 3 to 5, we can go as much as 5 minutes, if everyone's okay to stay on. But just about that, anything that from your experiences that you'd like to share about during the interview, or then even just after the interview, if you want to talk about that just now, that would be great.
So like I said before, I've done a lot of different interviews with a lot of different people. Some have been maybe 1 or 2 people, some have been a panel. What I would say is take a deep breath before you walk into that room. Just exhale before you walk in, because you know finally that the minute you walk through that door, you have to sell yourself. What I would say is speak confidently and speak slowly. Don't babble on. And if you are a nervous babbler, like I can be sometimes, just rein it back a wee bit, because it does help in your presentation and how you come across, and it gives you time to think. With the STAR method, don't be afraid to ask the panel to repeat the question if you don't understand it the first time, or if your nerves do get the better of you. You know, it does no harm to ask, and if anything, you're thinking maybe she is thinking a wee bit more about what she could do or he could do to answer the question. Generally, all the interviews will follow the same process. The first question will be either tell us something about yourself or tell us about the company. You know, and a bit about yourself, it could be, right, I'm Catherine, and I play the harp. I am a ambassador. You know, outside of work, I have a dog. You know, and it can be anything that you want to be, just to show who you are as a person and sort of what you like to do. Ask your questions at the end, and I would say, you know, really ask them on reflecting on what they've asked you. So if they ask you, say, I don't know, how would you feel about working in a team? Then come back at the end and say, well, what would you expect me to do in the team? Would you want me to be in a leading role? Would you want to be in a sub-leader role? You know, how would I fit into the team? What would you expect of me in the first couple of weeks within the company, within the first couple of months within the company? And ask for the targets that you would be expected to hit. And I think that's what helped me in realizing what I would be walking into. I've written a couple of notes, that's what I'm asking. If there's questions around your CV and I ask you to go into a bit more detail, don't be thinking I haven't said enough. It's maybe because they've seen something that interests them and they want to know a bit more about you. So don't be afraid if I ask you to go into a bit more detail, or why did you say that? Because often you can answer something and it'll branch off into maybe 2 or 3 different questions, all because they're interested in what you have said. If there's an interview where you're asked to prepare a presentation, take the time to run through that and to try and keep it to the time that they have requested, because if it runs over, they will lose interest and they'll lose it very, very quickly. And at the end of the interview, if you are offered a site visit, please do take it, because only then when you do the site visit will you see what you will be walking into as a company, and you'll feel yourself with your gut, yes, this is for me, or no, it's not, because you don't want to be going in a couple of months later and saying, I wish I did that site visit, because then I know what it would have been like. You know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I would say if you're offered a site visit or you really are keen to ask for a site visit, do it, because you don't know whether it might help you or it might, you know, change your mind. But do what's right for you, and I will always say stick with your guns. If you want to do a site visit, just ask for a site visit, because it will ease your sort of mind at the end. After the interview, thank them for their time. You know, pleasantries aren't often come out, and they don't often come out in industry, but I would definitely say thank them for their time, because they're taking an hour out of their day to interview to come into their team. And even if you are unsuccessful, you know, you still seen the company. Afterwards, the interview is all finished, and you know, hopefully you get it. That's great. If you don't, take that as a learning opportunity rather than a problem, and ask them for the feedback. They can, you know, give you the feedback right away, but if they don't, ask them for the feedback, because then you will know for the next interview what you need to focus on. And take that interview, you know, feedback from them and really look in to see, well, I wasn't too great at this, so what do I need to do? Maybe it wasn't, I didn't detail my skills enough, I didn't show them enough of my, you know, skills in this way or that way. But go back and learn from that, and don't see it as a problem. Yes, it will knock your confidence, because I have been in that position, and Gail can tell you, there's an interview I really, really wanted and I didn't get it, and it knocked me for weeks. And I was getting interview after interview and they weren't the same, and it did knock me. But once you get the feedback and you reflect on yourself and what maybe your presentation technique was, just go from there and it will help. I would say, you know, before you even start interviewing, this is maybe a wee bit too soon, I have been on the end in this company here where I have seen applications come in for posts, and immediately, you know, we'll read what they've got and rejecting them. And the number one reason why they are rejecting these applications is because their CV does not match the job description. And when I say match, it means that, say, they're asking for skills or on business skills or on, you know, this piece of software and you haven't got that on your CV in any way, shape or form, they're not going to look at it. So even if it's the minor details of I have done one module in this, that one module is the difference between you getting offered an interview and not. So any small piece of information that you have that reflects on the CV and the job application that they have sent out, please do put it in, because it does help in the filtering of the system. I think that's most of what I have to say. For those of you who may be interested, Decora are currently hiring for a couple of positions as well. So definitely give us a look out, and we would be to see some of your applications coming in. So we have 2 engineering posts and 1 for marketing. So please do share the word about. But yes, if there's any questions, you can ask me at the end, or if you want my email address, I have no problem with that. If you want to a couple of questions after.
And you're on LinkedIn as well, Katherine. They could connect with you.
I'm on LinkedIn. So yes, connect with me on LinkedIn if there's any questions, or you just want to ask me a couple more questions about, you know, interviews in general or specifically about STEM areas. I'm definitely more than willing to help. So my name is Catherine Dynes on LinkedIn, and I'll be, there's very few of us on LinkedIn anyway. But yes, definitely send me a message to LinkedIn or send me a request, and just say you're at this session, and I'll be more than willing to answer any questions that you've got.
That is perfect. Look, thank you so much. Apologies that we did run over our time today, but thanks everybody for staying on, and I hope you found that useful. It was really great to have Katherine along, Katherine, so thank you for coming along and sharing your experiences, because it's always really good to hear from somebody who has kind of walked through the process, and it wasn't always rosy, but look where you are now.
I know.
And it's about learning from those experiences, and as you say, like it's very, very seldom that you will come across anybody who has got every interview that they go for. So it's about learning from it and going again, and just not making it reflect negatively on you, not taking it that it's something about you. So thank you so much. Thanks everybody. As I say, I will share the recording of this and some additional resources just to support you in terms of preparing for interview. And remember that you can book in, and you can book in for interview support if you do have an interview coming up. So that can be done through Handshake. Click on Career Centre Appointments and select your time there. All right, and I'll see anybody that's joining for the online assessments. I'll see you over there in about 5 minutes. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.